Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Super excited to have you here on a Monday. I don't know if anybody else has a case in the Mondays. I know that I do. The day is flying by already, and I feel like I don't have enough coffee to fill me up, but I'm super excited to be here. Again, I am the co-founder and CEO of Female Founder Collective, which is a platform that empowers, enables, and connects female founders from all over the globe. And we also have the most recent launch of 10th House, which is our paid community where we do a very specific job of connecting founders by stage, by industry, by whether or not they're venture backed to one another, as well as to resources that are relevant for their business to get ahead and scale, in addition to being able to get pathways to capital. So think angel investors, think venture capitalists, as well as grants and other sources of funding that don't have to be part of giving away equity. But today, we're going to be talking a lot about digital marketing with one of the icons in that arena, truly. We're super excited to have Aliza Licht here. She is the author of best-selling book, Leave Your Mark. It's also a podcast. And I happen to be a huge fan of it. She also started her ascent. You might know her the best from DKNY PR Girl. So she's going to talk a little bit more about her background, and then I'm going to get right into a ton of questions that I have for you, and can't wait to get your advice.
Ali, it's so good to see you. Thank you for the intro. And I'm so excited that Female Founder Collective launched this 10th house because it's so incredibly important to put the right people together in the right rooms. I feel like, being an entrepreneur is a lonely thing at times. So you guys, you and Rebecca are doing an amazing job bringing like-minded people together. And I'm honored to be here as, a member as well. So hi, everyone. I'm Aliza Licht. Long story short, I am a brand marketer. I am someone who spent my career in PR and then moved over to marketing later on, and social media later on. And Ali mentioned DKNY PR Girl. I'm probably most known, and this has already been like a long time ago at this point, but it's interesting that we're still talking about it. In 2009, when brands were first sort of dipping their toes into the digital space, I created an anonymous social media personality called DKNY PR Girl, which was inspired by Gossip Girl, which now Gossip Girl's back. And it was really meant to just be a fly on the wall view into the world of Donna Karan, my job in PR. And it sort of just grew and grew. And I think one of the things that's most interesting and sort of now even directs my work today, because I am a full-time executive in social media and brand experiences, is that the principles remain the same. How you build a brand in the digital landscape is the same today as it was back then from the perspective of storytelling. So it's something we're going to get a lot into. But as you mentioned, Leave Your Mark is my baby, my side hustle. And, I think that at the end of the day, what I feel most passionate about speaking to is really whether it's for you personally, an actual company, or even, you within a corporate structure, like how do you create your personal brand, especially in a Zoom world where maybe you don't even meet the people you're trying to pitch or working with. So I'll let you take it away from there.
I think it's so interesting that you had your day job, so to speak, and yet we're running DKNY PR Girl. If you think about modern day social media, It's a full-time job and then some, right? There's so many platforms. You have to figure out which one to use. How did you sort of balance that with the other tasks that you had on your hand? Because I think that's how also a lot of our founders start out, right? Is doing it maybe as a side hustle. So can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, I'm going to start off with a really simple answer. I'm a Gemini, so I think the dual personality works well for me.
All comes back to astrology.
It all comes back to astrology. But no, in all seriousness, I think that and I think founders understand this, like when you're building something from scratch, and you're passionate about it, it doesn't matter how much work it takes, right? So yes, you're right. It was sort of like, no one told me to be tweeting 100 times a day, 24/7, but I felt the community response, and I knew what was happening as far as like what it was cultivating on behalf of the brand. So I was very motivated to do it, and I had 2 screens. I think having a second screen sounds silly, but like, I don't mean like your phone screen. I mean like an actual second screen, like my husband in finance, has a second screen, to be able to stay on the conversation throughout the day. And to be fair, back in 2009, it was really Twitter where I built this personality first, right? So Twitter is about having a conversation. It was less so about posting an image. So being, showing up and engaging with the comments back was really what got people to engage more and more. And then, I got addicted to it. It was like an adrenaline rush to realize how you can really affect communication around the world in a really fun and storytelling kind of way.
And how did you developed a personality around this girl, right? Like, how did you begin to define what that was? And was that an organic process? Was it something where it was kind of like your personality with a couple things that you infused in there? And again, you're a Gemini, so multiple personalities.
It's funny. I actually feel like I have one personality, but I think the multitasker,
no, I agree.
The multitasking communicator side of it is what works well. Honestly, the same way you would start out to define a brand filter for any business you're doing. It's like, what are those key adjectives that define? And like literally pen to paper, like who was she? Like, what was her personality? What did I want people to view her as? I wanted her to feel like a little bit aspirational, but totally accessible, which is a really interesting balance, right? She's your friend who always has the better wardrobe, and she's gonna tell you if you look good in those pants. But, she's someone that people would come to for, style advice and give also viewers a behind the scenes into the world of, let's say, producing fashion shows or dressing celebrities for the red carpet. So
right.
Again, when you think about, it's like 2 ways. It's like thinking about your brand filter and those adjectives and what you stand for and the message you want to give off. But then conversely, what is the service you're providing? Why is someone following you? And I think that's sometimes something that people forget. Like, there needs to be a value add for the content that you're putting out into the world.
100%. That's something we always say too at FFC. It's like, what are you giving back to the person that has chosen to dedicate some of their attention to you? But you actually, in a podcast recently, you were talking about how it became very editorial and you became protective over that editorial voice. So how did you balance that with selling?
I didn't really balance it, I think, is the point. So I think that you have to remember that your best answer as to what your content strategy should be is what people are engaging in. So really doing a study on like, okay, here's what I posted this month. What types of posts were they? Sorry, that's Charlie. What types of posts were they? What did people like? What didn't they like? And do more of the same. Let me shut her up for a second.
This is very relatable, Aliza. All of us, this is a good part of your social media personality. We all have dogs at home, so.
Yes, who want bones?
I'm sure there will be barking soon on my side.
Yeah, so letting the community tell you what they love about what you post and what they're like, can do without it, right? And then, by the way, competitive analysis for your competitors. Going, figuring out, okay, here are 10 companies or 10 founders that you either want to model yourself after or you're competitive with, and like really do a deep dive into what are they posting? How often are they posting? What types of content? Is it all video? Is it carousel? There are a lot of, later.com has a great blog on all of the up to the minute social media do's and don'ts in very, very simple terms. And, like today I was reading, they said best time to post is 6 a.m. on Instagram. It's like, okay, who's doing that? Not me, not you, but like they analyzed 35 million posts, and 6 a.m. apparently was the time. So
6 a.m. Eastern for all of us listening?
6 a.m. your time zone.
Got it. It's
So,
probably because
you know.
Eastern, everybody's commuting and
Yeah, maybe. I mean, again, you also have to do what's good for you, right? And I think, my biggest rule of thumb with all of this is start as you mean to go. You can't be everywhere. You're not going to be on every single platform. You're not going to be posting 3 to 5 times a day. You need to figure out a cadence that works for you, doesn't take away from the founding the startup side of things, right? Like you actually have real work to do, but come up with a strategy that works, that feels comfortable, and that you can maintain and be consistent with.
And you talk about, you say do what works for you, but I also heard you talk about TikTok, for example.
Yeah.
And the fact that for Reels, that's what Instagram's going to be putting the lion's share of their resources behind, or really they're going to be favoring in the algorithm, which is really interesting. I didn't think about it that way. If you're a brand that isn't good at video, or maybe you're like, how does my particular content translate into video or into like dance videos or cat videos? How do you think about that, Aliza, when you're talking to a brand that maybe is a little more sophisticated or more hard hitting or serious in their approach, and they're trying to figure out what their presence looks like on a TikTok or Reels, etc.?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't think it's for everyone. I don't think listen, I'm not on TikTok personally. It's not, I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the content strategy. I don't want to do those videos personally. So it's not there. But I guess you have to think about it this way. There's market share to be had when a platform is new. And we all know that if you jump on the bandwagon early, there's a really good chance you can grow very, very quickly organically before things sort of plateau for the rest of everyone, right? So people who started on Clubhouse really early, right? Who were able to really garner followings, like now it's open to everyone, much, much harder to create a following, right? So with Reels, same thing. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the platforms are basically telling you what they want you to do. And if the head of Instagram is saying that Instagram is no longer a photo sharing platform, I don't know if y'all read that, but basically like it's not. Okay, well that kind of blows up everyone's strategy. So what are they telling you? They want video. They want to be competing with the likes of TikTok. So how do you get comfortable with video? It may not be you. It may be someone else on your team who's really comfortable, or it may be, maybe you have like a brand mascot, or maybe you want to animate something, or there's a lot of ways to do it. It doesn't have to be you. And I also think like when you're not comfortable with something, it's never going to do well, right? So forcing yourself onto TikTok when you're not someone who's comfortable on camera it's not going to work. So really think about also your audience. Like, where are your customers? Where are the people who actually would purchase your product? Maybe they're on TikTok, maybe they're not. Maybe they're listening to NPR. Maybe you should be doing radio, so it doesn't necessarily have to be social. I will say a fun stat though, like literally half the people who are on TikTok are not even on Instagram. So it's not necessarily an overlapping audience. So you really do have to think about, again, what is your content strategy and how can you create more consistently? And if you can't, then don't do it.
Had no idea about that TikTok and Instagram stat. That's so interesting. And then let's going back to sort of DKNY PR girl and talking about tactics. And maybe this wasn't even tactical. Maybe it was just natural and because you were curious. But with DKNY PR girl, you responded to every single comment, which is amazing, in the early days too, to be able to go and do that. And you had a lot of comments. Like this wasn't like, 30 comments. It was probably significantly more than that. How did you ultimately translate that into a selling opportunity for the business? Or did you think about it that way? What were sort of the filters that you used when thinking about community building and how it would ultimately be attributed back to the brand?
Great question. So first of all, remember a second screen, right? So I do think if you're in meetings all day and you come back to your feed, and you have 100 comments, it's much harder to go through them. But because it was a timeline that was going throughout the day, it was something that I was able to sort of affect in real time. And I think, essentially where I would respond is to the questions. If someone tagged DKNY in something that was just like a great comment, I would just like the post or maybe retweet the post. But one of the things that going back to your initial question earlier about personality, is like, I wanted it to feel like you were speaking to your friend. So if your friend asks you a question, like this girl, Molly in Seattle, we're still friends today, she tweeted that she was looking for black shoes, a new pair of black shoes. She did not tweet DKNY. I did a search, as I often did, and this is a great tactic too, to think about what are your sort of core competencies. Okay, shoes are important market share for us. Let me do a search on who's talking about shoes right now and jump into those conversations. So I saw her tweet, and I decided to make a Pinterest board for Molly of all the DKNY black shoes that are available for sale, linking back. And she was so blown away by the fact that I took the time to make her this custom board of options, especially because she didn't ask me for it or tag DKNY. It's still something like, I held a mentoring event for Leave Your Mark like 3 months ago. Molly in Seattle showed up and she was like, hi, I'm Molly in Seattle, and we spoke in 2009. Like, it was crazy. So the point is, it's really about authentic connection. And at the end of the day, yes, did I use UTM links to track and see if I add this link, I can see what conversion happens? Absolutely. You need to put in the back-end analytics to see how things are performing. But I also was there to create community. And I think sometimes people get really, really focused on the direct response and conversion. And I think there's two different things here. You have your performance marketing team who's running your ads, and they're really there to get that conversion, that direct response. But your organic social media team is really there to build community. Those are two different functions. So your organic social media team should be just like embracing the community and bringing them into your world and sharing the magic sauce about what's happening in your company. Whereas your performance team, and when I say team, I understand startups don't have teams, but like your performance freelancer or whoever is working on it, or maybe yourself, sometimes you put on your direct response hat, and sometimes you're putting on your community building hat. And the community building is a slower climb, but eventually it does result in conversion.
Sorry, trying to take myself off mute. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think loyalty is very much prized today. It almost went to mass, and it was very difficult to garner loyalty, but I do think that's a really great way to do so. I want to talk about today's world, right? You said that it's probably very similar today, earlier, in terms of how you build a following. But when a brand is starting out and say they're opening up their first social media account, what are some initial steps you would recommend they take as they're trying to figure out, how do I allocate my resources, my time? Maybe it's just me. Maybe you do have a team, but again, limited resources. How should they think about those initial building blocks for creating a following?
So you have to decide first and foremost, like, what is your brand voice? And that really needs to be like written out, and the style guide for that. So you might say, okay, this is a very sophisticated brand. We're not going to abbreviate anything, even in social caption. Or this is a fun, young Gen Z brand, and we're going to speak totally in abbreviation. So really thinking about the written word and like how that comes off in social. The next thing is like, content is a beast. Content is the black hole that you can never feed enough, right? So how are you getting these assets? Are these assets being produced in advance where you can map out your content strategy a week or two in advance? Is this something you're going to do one photo shoot and you're going to hope that you have enough assets for a certain period of time? My feeling is to really think about, what are your content buckets? Like, easy examples. Once a week, you're going to do a tip. Once a week, you're going to show a picture of product. Once a week, you're going to have a quote, a founder quote, because you're going to highlight different founders. So really thinking about like, what are your content buckets? How are you getting those assets created or repurposed? Like you can regram something too, but really thinking through the strategy behind the content will also tell you, okay, how hard was it to get a week baked? If it's really hard to get a week baked, maybe you're not posting every day. Maybe you're posting 3 times a week. So you kind of have to see what's possible based on what assets you have. The other thing that I think is really important, and I speak to founders all the time regarding this, it's really hard when you're starting a company to have someone else do the social for you unless that person is so immersed in your brand and understands you to the core. Because as a founder, it's like nails on a chalkboard. When you see something that's off brand, sometimes you can't even articulate it, but you see it and you literally want to die because you're like, I would never say that. I would never post this. So I do think, being consistent yourself in the beginning to really get to know your community is really important. The other thing is not being precious with the content. A lot of people think of, oh, my feed. Okay, no one views your feed. Like 1% of people actually see the feed, right?
We talk about this all the time, yeah.
So I understand everyone wants to feel like a gallery and they want it to be beautiful and they're having, color trends and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, what's gonna work the best is you as a founder connecting with your audience. They wanna see you. They wanna see you live. They wanna engage with you. And doing lives is another great example. Like get to know the people who are following you. And then you'll see really quickly what they want from you. And a lot of times what they want is really just to engage with you directly. So I think less about sort of the precious gallery feel and more about authentic connection. And then, doing it at the pace that works for your schedule.
Yeah, I think going back to founders being uncomfortable, right? And you just sort of addressed this question, but I was going to ask if you think it's important for the founder to be core to that voice from the beginning, because things have shifted, right? Where the brand used to be the voice. Like DKNY PR girl would have worked in the past, but it's like people would also want to see like real people behind the brand.
Yeah.
And develop a relationship with them. And I think that's probably due to the advent of podcasting and feeling such an intimate relationship with the host there. But how would you suggest somebody tackle if they don't feel like they're a great content creator, or they're just not sort of sure what types of things to post? Is it just creating that calendar, like you said, up front to help guide them? Or is it maybe having somebody else who's really good at social come and direct you, even if you're ultimately the face or some combination thereof?
I think both ways work. I think that first and foremost, going back to being a founder in the first place, when you're asking investors for money, you're presenting. Right? You're presenting, and I think as a founder, you need to get comfortable with presenting, whether it's in person or on camera. So whether that means you get coached by a media trainer or somebody who gives you the tips and tricks to feel comfortable, it is an essential skill as a founder to be able to pitch yourself or pitch your idea. And I think going back to what you were saying about being comfortable on camera, sometimes the harder part is speaking to camera. Like if you take out your phone and you're like, hi guys, da 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 da. An
Right.
easier way is to get someone who you're really comfortable with, a co-founder, a colleague, your sister, your whomever, and say, hey, I would love you to do a fireside chat with me. And I would love you to ask me questions. And then you practice together and then you do it. And doing it with someone you trust who's drawing out the answers from you or drawing out the content from you is much more comfortable for people who aren't really like seasoned in speaking to camera. Speaking to camera is hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for broadcasters, much less somebody with no experience in that. And all of a sudden, and you have a day job that's a very hard day job at that.
Yeah. I mean, I would much rather do this format than speak to camera.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that idea. I do want to pivot to Leave Your Mark.
Okay.
And I want to talk about how that was sort of a side hustle, and how did you go about the process of ultimately writing the book? I think you said somebody had approached you. I want to hear a little bit about that story, and then why you decided to write the book that you ultimately wrote.
Yes. So an editor from Grand Central at the time approached me to write the book. She was following DQ My PR Girl at that point. I was not anonymous anymore, so she knew who to reach out to. And she just said, like, I follow your account, I read your blog, and I think there's a book in here somewhere. And I said, thank you so much, but I definitely don't want to write a book, nor have the time. I had 2 little kids at the time, full-time job, whole 9 yards. And she was like super persistent. And she basically like somewhat bullied me into doing it in a way. But I bullied myself, because what I realized was I was just scared to do it. Like, I was just like, what if no one reads it? What if it's just the worst thing ever? Also, I wanted to own it, right? So DQ My PR Girl is not it's proprietary. I did it on behalf of a company. So if I'm going to do something like write a book, then I need to figure out how I can do it for myself, which I ended up figuring out. And the company was very supportive, and I'm super grateful to them. But I think at the end of the day, what inspired me to say yes was that I wanted to grab coffee with everyone who was DMing me on Twitter saying, hey, I'd love to work in fashion. How do I start? Like, all the career advice. I had been tweeting tons of tips, like PR 101 tips for aspiring young PR people and young professionals. And I love the mentoring part, but you can't grab coffee with everyone. So to me, Leave Your Mark was really a virtual mentorship for me to convey my story and pay forward everything that, I've learned along the way through my career. And it's not just for people who work in fashion. It's really, the lessons are sort of for any industry, but the message is the same, which is like, good old hard work and really thinking through like what your goals are in like really small digestible bites versus this very scary, like, what's your 3-year plan or what's your 5-year plan? Like, I like to make it really just like not intimidating for people, because I think it's really hard to think about what your life can be like in 5 years. So it's really meant to be like, how do you land your dream job? How do you kill it in your career? And then, of course, build your personal brand on social media, which is the DQ My PR Girl story. So I did it, and I'm so glad I did, but it was scary. So I had to face my own fear.
And then you started working with a number of different companies too. When you launched that book, you left DKNY.
Yes.
And began consulting, right?
So the book came out in May 2015, and I left the company in December. And I basically started consulting, and I sucked at it. Like, I did it for 10 months, and I was like, you are like not good at this. And I didn't really I kept a sheet on like all my leads and all my pitches and all my meetings. And I was meeting with incredible people, but I felt like I didn't really have much to show for it, or the consulting gigs that were coming in, I was like not into doing. And then the stuff that I wanted to do, I wasn't getting offered. So I decided to then, I wrote an article for Forbes, which is called This is How You Know You're Not Meant to Be an Entrepreneur. With like a super transparent, like, here's everything I did and here's why it all didn't work. And then I ended up going back in-house into corporate marketing and fashion for 2.5 years after that at Alison Olivia. And then, again, that creative bug of feeling like I want something on my own. Leave Your Mark was already 4 years old. So I needed something new, and that became the podcast. So when I left Alice and Olivia and started the podcast, I was like, oh God, I have to consult again? Like, what, am I an idiot? Like, why would I do that? But this time I sort of wrote down, and I think this is a really good thing for anyone who's considering consulting. Like, what are you good at? Like, what are you capable of doing? But then what do you want to do? Because I realized I didn't want to do PR anymore. So all those 17 years of comm skills, like I still have them, but like, that's not what I wanted to do. So I really focused on like what I really was passionate about doing, which was social media and brand marketing. And so I positioned myself as like a rent-a-CMO and embedded into different brands. And that teamwork, that collaboration versus the sort of solopreneur of consulting previously gave me a different mindset on consulting, and it worked really well. Of course, until, I started consulting with Warby Parker, and now, of course, I'm there full time because, it's an amazing thing. So consulting's on hold for a little while, but Leave Your Mark is alive and well, and I'm launching a boot camp for people ages 20 to 27. So really, this career accelerator, 1 month immersive experience. At leaveyourmarkcommunity.com, because I think that it's really hard to find mentors, and I really want to solve that for people around the world.
Actionable mentors too, right? Not something where you're just sitting down and getting advice one time and then trying to put it into action. I love that it's actually a boot camp.
Exactly. And it's funny because like what you guys are doing with 10th House is a mentorship too, right? Everyone who joins that group, it's like peer-to-peer mentoring, but with people who are more on the same playing field as far as all trying to start a company. This is like, starting in your career, like who shows you the ropes when you graduate college and you get your first job? Like, unless you have a good boss, there's nobody.
Right. It's true. Nobody's sort of looking out for you.
Exactly.
And then I'm wondering, because something that I found, I consulted for a little bit, is that was such an exceptional sort of panoramic view of the industry that I got, or various industries that I got, that I was able to sort of see these patterns of what worked, what didn't work at certain brands. Was there anything that was like super surprising or illuminating for you as you started working with multiple companies that you would say was a big sort of aha moment or takeaway from the consulting experience, or the Rent-a-CMO experience, I should say?
Yeah. So my clients were really diverse. So I had fashion, and then I had wellness, and then I had fitness and apparel, like fitness in the fitness space. So I would say that the more real the content, the more like lo-fi, like not the most amazing produced video you've ever seen, the more culty the brand became. The other thing that is like really important, I think, is like starting as you mean to go. Meaning, I had some clients who were like, we don't pay influencers, like we gift and hope for the best. And really sticking to this purely organic strategy has served them really well, because people who genuinely post the brand, like you can, like there's like literally, it's like an even playing field, like no one's being paid. And then there's other companies. Listen, I'm on the board of the American Influencer Council. I think talent should be paid. And I think creators really, really move the needle, whether it's a nano creator, a micro creator, to really convey the brand story. But you have to know how to work with talent. And you have to understand that when you're bringing someone into your brand to represent you, first and foremost, from like a value system, making sure that you share those same values. Because what we're seeing now is some of this, like, someone's under contract with a brand, and then they mouth off on something on the internet, and then all of a sudden that brand gets dragged through, or conversely, the brand does something wrong and then the talent gets dragged through. So really knowing who you're working with, and then understanding like your commission.
Sorry to interrupt, but how do you do that, right? Like, because I've been in similar situations in past companies where we've aligned with an ambassador, and then all of a sudden they post something and we're like, whoa, that is totally off brand for us.
Yeah.
Not something that we also believe in. And you're so right. You get dragged into it.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that they don't? Because, is it just, you have to hope that the things that they've posted so far are really indicative?
Well, no one's perfect, right? But first and foremost, do a good old Google search and do it under news and do it under all and figure out what has been done in the past. Usually a track record's pretty clear. If they have a history of sort of mouthing off on something, they probably will do it again. The other thing are contracts, having morality clauses, having clauses in there that basically state your value system and that, let's say, of course, you are, inclusive and supportive of all different types of people, and you expect the talent that you work with shares that same value. So being really upfront about your expectations, and then, making sure, from a celebrity standpoint, right of publicity, making sure that everything is just agreed upon in advance. There's talking points in advance. You practice talking points. It's not just like the Wild Wild West where you just hope they go on camera and say the right thing. So there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. But at the end of the day, I think that, what's consistent across, going back to your initial question of across all the brands that I've worked on the past, year and a half, really sticking to their brand DNA and why they exist in the first place. I think a lot of times, there's pressure if you're not growing or you have investors and people want to see certain returns, but really always remaining true to the problem you're trying to solve, why you started in the first place, and what is on brand or not on brand for you that will always guide you in the right direction.
I think from basically those filters are for everything, right? As you're sort of thinking about building your brand and your exposure and the conversations that you have, I think it all falls under that umbrella. I want to quickly talk about partnerships too with other organizations, because I think a lot of our founders are always asking about how do we think about who to partner with, where we'll have ROI on that. And last week we actually had a great conversation with Sonia Rasula of Unique Markets, where she talked about that, and she talked too about value alignment. Are there any other sort of tips or filters that you would suggest using when it comes to partnerships and growing your brand, but also in sort of growing your brand voice?
Yeah. I believe totally in partnerships and the cross-pollination of those audiences. But first and foremost, every single partnership you do is going to affect your future partnerships. So holding out for the right alignment versus jumping into something just to do it. Because whenever I'm reviewing partnerships, I always want to know who the person partnered with before or who the brand partnered with before and what that track record is. And are those brands direct competitors? Do those brands share the same values? So, if you're a big sustainability, a brand who's really passionate about sustainability, and the person, you want to work with has done, tons of Zara or tons of, brands that are fast fashion that are obviously now trying to rectify from a sustainability perspective, then maybe that's not the right alignment for you. But just to dig into it a little more, really laying down, okay, what are both brands bringing to the table, and how can you make both sides equitable? How many social media posts are they doing? How many are you? Are you guys both doing an email? Are you doing an event? So making sure that both sides are carrying the load in an equal way and having every single thing in a contract.
Yep, I love that too. You can go out with very specific asks. I always tell people on the team to quantify it. So that's a helpful answer. I also want to talk about, you've talked before about ideal customer versus the core customer, right? And oftentimes those can be like this. As a brand gets bigger, that especially will happen, right? How do you think about your communication efforts towards those kinds of people, and then your total sort of marketing wheel how should you be thinking about what portion you're sort of allocating towards the ideal customer while still keeping that core customer base intact and feeling cozy and like you're catering to them?
Such a great question. I think, first of all, understanding that you can market to one customer, right? But a different customer can end up buying it. But why are they buying it? They're buying it because in a way they are aspiring to be the customer that you're marketing to. So sometimes like you think about it from like a perspective of like, you know, maybe your models are in their 20s, but someone in their 50s is buying that because they also want to feel like they have, you know, younger style, right? So I don't think anyone wants to see necessarily the exact replica of themselves in a marketing campaign, but I think this goes back to like diversity and inclusion of all different types of people, because I don't think anyone is marketing to one person, but I also think that you can't be everything to everyone either.
Right.
So really thinking about, again, going back to like your core DNA, your brand values, like your premise and the problem and who you're trying to solve a problem for, and really making sure that you're not ignoring that demographic because you want like a young, hot, you know, modeling campaign. And I think like, you know, Donna Karan, you know, if you think about ad campaigns back in the day from the 90s, like, I mean, it was women in their 60s, women in their 20s. It was, you know, size 2 to size 14, black, white, brown. I mean, everyone. So, you know, if you look back to people who have done it in the past, who were always a proponent of diversity and inclusion and making sure that they're speaking to all women, you can learn a lot. I think over the more recent history, things have gotten a little astray, but there's certainly great examples of founders who have really, really spoken to all women versus one type of woman in the past.
Very professional. I'm getting a phone call on my computer right now.
So totally fine.
Well, I wanted to see if anybody in the audience has questions right now, because if not, I want to ask you about the future, because I feel like you've given us so many helpful tips and ways to start putting pen to paper on building out the brand. And I know that we learned a lot from you today. So does anybody have questions before I have Aliza become our soothsayer? Genie, if you will.
And I can't see any questions, so you're going to have to tell me if there are any.
I can usually see some on the side. At any rate, I'm going to go ahead and ask my question.
Okay, fine. Great.
I wanted to see what you think are going to be the biggest shifts that have happened during the pandemic that are going to stay, and then what do you think is going to change as we sort of come into recovery mode, hopefully continue into recovery mode?
Hope that's true. So audio is having a major moment. You know, what Clubhouse has been able to do in a very short amount of time. I mean, I read yesterday there's over 600,000 rooms they're hosting. It's crazy. So I do think that this idea of like on-demand community, whether it's you're going live and people are being brought into it, Twitter Spaces is another example, Clubhouse is another example. I think people want on-demand, real conversations. That's not to say that people, TikTok's obviously, TikTok has live as well, so that's happening in a big way. It's not to say that people don't want to still post things that have happened or, you know, have something more curated. But I think the pandemic has showed us that, you know, being able to connect with people in this format on live or Google Meets or Zoom or whatever you want to do, you can make real connections. And so many people have started jobs or been looking for jobs virtually during this time and are working with people they've never met, but yet you feel like you have because you're just on camera with them all day long. So I think The good thing is, I think we all know that like running around from meeting to meeting across the city, wherever you live, is probably not the best use of our time. I think like no one misses like commuting to work or running from here and there. Certainly as a consultant, I hated it running around the city. But I think at the end of the day, people are looking to create smaller groups and communities of like-minded people. So going back to what you and Rebecca are doing for 10th House, it's like like-minded people across different industries who are looking to share information. And I think what everyone's looking to do now is share information and compare and contrast and learn from each other. And I think the most successful people are going to be the ones who are willing to share the information and share where they've made mistakes and share what they've learned versus sort of keeping everything close to the chest. But I think, at the end of the day, live video, audio, video in general, I think you can already see the metrics turning on Instagram. I posted a still picture today. It's like 3 likes or whatever it is. And then
I know it feels like it's like dinosaur days.
It's dinosaur days, but my shoes were really cute. You just post them. But like, you can see the difference. I mean, you can test it yourself. Video is where everyone's headed.
Yeah.
And you just need to get on the bandwagon or you're going to be left behind.
And everybody invest in technologies that make you look really good in moving picture and invest in makeup that you can, and hair stuff that you can really easily do at home, because now it's like, gone are the days of the pandemic where you didn't have to get dressed and you didn't necessarily have to put makeup on. So
and by the way, if that's your thing, right? Like I think like, when you look on TikTok and you look at Gen Z, they're putting it all out there. There's no makeup, there's no anything. It's just real people sharing.
Well, I love it. Real people win.
Real people do win.
Real community wins. And audio wins. So everybody take those amazing insights away. And thank you, Aliza, as always. I'm going to go create our brand filter again with our team.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Always.
And where can we find you all?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, Aliza Licht. Leave Your Mark is in Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. The book is in multiple languages, in all the bookstores and Amazon, of course, and leaveyourmarkcommunity.com. If you're within the ages of 20 to 27, please apply. That's launching in October.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great. And thanks for great questions. I loved it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.